We all know the real world and in turn real data is messy and imperfect. Therefore, uncertainty almost automatically occurs in any application of machine learning. Our keynote speaker for the day, Lavanya Tekumala, founder of MachineLearningInterview.com, will talk to us about how to manage uncertainty in machine learning and make decisions. Lavanya?
Hello all, thank you for the introduction. I'm Lavanya. I did a PhD from the Indian Institute of Science in machine learning and worked for over 10 years at Amazon, Myntra, InMobi, and Kino. I'm the founder of AI Phonic Labs and I run MachineLearningInterview.com, which is a platform to help with data science interviews. So today's topic is handling uncertainty, Bayesian methods, and deep learning. So let's get started. Just a small technical glitch. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, cool, it's working. Okay, so why do we care about uncertainty? So if you look at this picture, imagine you're in a self-driving car and you're looking at vehicles in front of you. It's very important to detect other vehicles on the road, and it's important not to mistake a big trailer that's on your side with like the open sky. And if you do so, it could lead to accidents and it could lead to loss of life. So uncertainty could be expensive, not only in this application, but in many more applications, for instance, healthcare, and there are so many other places where uncertainty could be expensive. So before we move on, let's learn a little bit about, let's recap something about Bayesian methods. Let's start with a small puzzle. Suppose you have a biased coin and you observe 3 tosses, you see 2 heads and 1 tails. And I ask you what is the probability of heads, you will probably say 2 by 3. This is the maximum likelihood estimate, which is the number of heads by total number of tosses. Suppose I change the data a little bit and I say in 2 tosses, you observe 2 heads. What is the probability of tails? Then you would say the probability of heads is 2 by 2, which is 1, and hence the probability of tails is 0. But this does not make sense because we have seen only 2 tosses. This is a classic example of overfitting. Okay, let's go on with this example, and suppose I see 6 tosses and 4 heads. You would again say the probability of heads is 2 by 3. If I say I have 600 tosses and 400 heads, once again you'll say the probability of heads is 2 by 3. But there's a difference in the 2 by 3 you're giving me every time, because when you have 600 tosses, you're more confident. And when you have only 3 tosses or 6 tosses, you're less confident. So it would be good if a model is able to characterize this level of confidence along with just giving a 2 by 3 as an estimate. In general, this kind of uncertainty where more data or a different kind of data could improve the result is called epistemic uncertainty. It's often also called model uncertainty. Let's look at a different example. Suppose you have these bunch of points and you are trying to find a regressor through this of an approximating line or a function. Whatever you do here, you cannot do a good job of approximating all these points well, because there is some inherent noise in this. The data is inherently noisy, and you see that as the value of x increases, this variance in data is getting higher. This kind of uncertainty that is inherent to the data is called aleatoric uncertainty or the data uncertainty. And the way to capture this is by somehow modeling that variance as a function of the input itself. So we've seen different types of uncertainty. Now, what is Bayesian modeling? So Bayesian modeling is a paradigm where we learn a distribution instead of a point estimate to capture uncertainty. For instance, instead of saying 2 by 3, if I can give you a distribution on the bias of my coin, then looking at the variance, I can see how confident I am. So the paradigm starts with a prior belief. So if you look at this picture, The light gray is the prior distribution, which could be, if we take the coin toss example, the prior for the bias P. And we have the likelihood, or the blue, which is what is the best fitting the data. And if you look at the dark gray, this is the posterior distribution that's trying to find a middle ground between our prior belief, but it is modified by the actual data to give an updated posterior distribution. If the posterior distribution is peaked, then we are more confident. If it is very wide, if the variance is high, then we are less confident. And you can see that again, for the coin toss example, we can start with a prior distribution that's almost a uniform here, which means all values of bias P are equally likely. And then when we see two heads and in two tosses, we have a high probability for P equals 1, but all the other values of P also have non-zero probabilities. And as we see more and more and more tosses in 500 trials, we have a fairly peaked distribution of the value of P. Okay, so let's look at a more realistic real life example on product size recommendation that I worked on at Amazon. So it's hard for customer to choose the size of a product online. If you go to like a fashion apparel or shoes and so on, this is because different brands have different sizing conventions. For instance, a Reebok size mapping could be size 6 is 15 centimeters, size 7 is 17 centimeters. While Nike could have a mapping of size 6 is 16 centimeters, size 7 is 18 centimeters. On top of this, brand data on product sizes is not always accurate, and it's sometimes even missing. So the customer is often confused and chooses an approximate size, leading to a lot of returns. So this project involved trying to reduce the size-related returns by looking at the past purchases of the customer and the other customers to try to determine what size to recommend to a customer for a particular product. And this work was actually published in WWW 2018 as well. So the point here is uncertainty is expensive here. Why? Because recommending the wrong size is worse than not recommending at all. Because if I recommend the wrong size, the customer would not only return it, but also maybe put a bad review. So let us walk through this example a bit more to get a glimpse of how I would build a Bayesian model and do inference with it from a high level. So the approach to solving this problem was, suppose I can find a latent size for every customer and that for every product. So we were looking at shoes here in this particular small piece of work here I'm talking about. So if we can put a latent size of customer for every customer I have an SI, and a latent size for a product J as TJ, and I put them on the same scale, then I can compare a customer size with a product size easily and choose that product whose size is closest to the customer. What is the data I have? So the data I have is in the form of transactions of the customer. So if a customer bought that particular product and returned it saying small or large, I record that as small or large. If it was not returned, it was a fit. So these are the transactions I have. And now my intuition to come up with this Bayesian model is as follows. So for small transactions where the customer returned saying small, the customer size is probably greater than the product size, which means SI is greater than TJ, the product size, by some quantity B1, some threshold. If the customer returned the product saying large, then the customer size is less than the product size by some threshold B2. And similarly, if the customer did not return the item and it's a fit, then we expect the customer size to be close to the product size. So it's bounded between some thresholds B2 and B1. Now let's look at it in a probabilistic sense. So if I fix a TJ and suppose I see the distribution over what value SI could take, if it were a fit transaction, I would expect the SI to be close to the TJ. So as you see, this graph is peaking. The SI probability is peaking over TJ. Once again, if it's a small transaction, we expect SI to be greater than TJ. So the probability of SI being higher than TJ, you can see the probability mass is the PDF is mostly towards the right of TJ. Similarly, as you see, for large transactions, the probability peaks to the left of Tj. Okay, so this is intuition. And now how do I write down a Bayesian model? We write down a Bayesian model by writing something called a generative process. A generative process is defining how the data is generated if we had known all the unknowns involved in our problem, and also specifying how the unknowns themselves are generated from their priors. So we start writing the generative process by first defining a prior for all these latent variables or unknowns, which are the SIs and TJs, customer and product sizes, by defining a normally distributed prior. So the customer size as the normal prior with its mean as the average size purchased in the recent transactions. And for a product, we have a normal prior with the catalog size as the mean. And we have some priors for B1, B2 as well. Now, what we want to generate is the data itself given these SIs and TJs. So if you see the previous picture, all these curves here are smooth transitions from 0 to 1 in the form of a logistic function. So we juxtapose all these curves that we saw in the previous picture to define whether a particular transaction is small, fit, or large, given the value of SI and TJ by putting together a bunch of sigmoids. And we don't need to go into the details, but the point is you need to come up with some PDF that will sum to 1. And we used this particular PDF. So this is the generative process. Now, the inference problem involves finding the posterior distribution of the unknowns, taking into account observed data. Here, the unknowns are the customer and the product sizes. The traditional approach for this is Gibbs sampling or other MCMC techniques or variational inference. So Gibbs sampling works by saying the posterior distribution we are trying to find is usually hard to derive mathematically. Usually we don't have closed form expressions for them. So why don't we try to draw samples from the posterior instead? So even though we do not know the expression for this distribution, if we could draw samples from it, then that is a way of approximating the distribution itself. So that's Gibbs sampling, which is just drawing samples from the posterior. And variational inference says, let us try to take another family that is simpler. So let's take a simpler distribution family, since the posterior is a hard distribution to directly work with, and find the member of this family that's closest to the posterior. And it does an optimization problem to find this distribution that's closest to the posterior, right? So we won't go to the details of these at all right now, but in our problem for shoe size recommendation, we work with variational inference. Now, when I say we work with variational inference, we had to derive the updates for SIs and TJs, which is a bit tedious, though not super hard, but one needs to be well versed with probabilistic modeling to be able to derive those updates. And we also implemented this and on Amazon scale using PySpark, and it was very efficient, of course, because we came up with these nice custom updates for it. And this was the shoe size recommendation project. So let's park this for a while and then quickly look at deep learning, which needs no introduction. So we'll just spend like half a minute here. So people use deep learning to capture complex non-linear relationships between data, because you can make the network arbitrarily wide and deep to capture more complex functions. Improve predictive capability, as we have seen in many vision and NLP tasks, where the state-of-the-art baselines have been surpassed using deep learning models in the recent few years. People use deep learning to avoid feature engineering. So especially in vision problems, you can give the entire image pixel by pixel as input instead of using complex filters from image processing to find features for your ML problem. Finally, availability of flexible and scalable platforms. So this is very important, because once I conceptualize a network that I want to use, architecture that I want to use, it is not very hard for me to go and put this down in a TensorFlow or high-level platforms like Keras and many other platforms that are available, MXNet and so on, Theano. So, okay, so this is a quick recap. Bayesian methods and deep learning. Let us see how these two disciplines have influenced each other to help us predict uncertainty better. So the first thing that comes to my mind here is we have deep Bayesian learning and Bayesian deep learning. These two are slightly different. In deep Bayesian learning, we use principles of deep learning to build deeper Bayesian networks and model more complex relationships. Bayesian deep learning is where we use principles of Bayesian modeling to model uncertainty in neural networks. So let's quickly look at both these. So I will talk a little bit more about deep Bayesian learning because I've worked more on this topic, and a little less on Bayesian deep learning because I'm still working on this topic and yeah, I'm tinkering around with it and we don't have a lot of time. Okay, so deep Bayesian learning. Let's take an example. So this is a paper that we had worked on long back for ECML 2013, entity topic modeling. So topic modeling is quite popular and a lot of you might have heard of it. Involves finding semantically related themes from a set of documents. Suppose I have this document. The topics in this document, this is a news article. Topics could be politics, disaster, floods, and so on. Now, the way I model these topics, the popular way is using latent Dirichlet allocation, also called LDA, which says the document is a distribution over topics and topics are distribution over words. That's the generative process. So now what we did here is we said there is let's say there are entities which are groupings over these topics themselves, which are some higher level grouping over these topics themselves. For example, the entity Obama here could have a distribution over all these topics. It would have a high weight for politics, maybe economy. It would have a low weight for food or music. So the way this was modeled is we now say a document is a distribution over entities. Entities are distribution over topics and topics are distribution over words. So the reason we are talking about this example is because we made this model slightly deeper compared to the original LDA topic model by adding one more layer. Recently, in the 2018 NIPS conference, in the Bayesian Deep Learning Workshop, we presented the following model, which is an extension of the previous model. And what this does is, this actually extends this hierarchy arbitrarily wide and deep. And what we noticed is, in the previous case, I had a nice semantic meaning for that higher level grouping called entity. Even when I don't have a nice semantic meaning, when I have multiple layers and when I make my network arbitrarily deep and wide, what we found was we are better able to model topics. The predictive power of the model increases. So this is an example of how principles from deep learning have influenced Bayesian models to come up with better ways to model more complex relationships. And there are many other models, deep Bayesian models, but we'll just look at this for now. So moving on, what is another way that deep learning has influenced Bayesian modeling is in the front of inference. So typically Bayesian models require tedious inference. But now we have black box techniques and we have probabilistic programming languages. The popular ones are PyMC3 and Stan, and also Edward and Pyro or a few others. And there are many more. So the two paradigms that we talked about, which is MCMC based and variation inference based, are both extended to work in a black box fashion so that we can specify the generative process and this inference is done automatically for us. So once again, this is a field that is in current research, but even the state of the art that we have is suitable for a lot of applications to be run at scale. So let's take a simple example to sort of drive this point home better. Suppose I go back to the LDA model, latent Dirichlet allocation. This is the generative model I have. So I said, I have topics which are modeled as a multinomial distribution over all the words in my vocabulary, and a document is a multinomial distribution over topics. That was my model. And now I can write down the generative model for it as follows. First, I generate the topic multinomial for every topic that is there over all the vocabulary from a Dirichlet prior distribution. The topic distribution itself is generated from a Dirichlet prior. Then a document is a distribution over topics. So the document distribution over topics is once again generated for each document from a Dirichlet prior. Now for each word in every document, we use the document distribution over topics to first pick a topic from the multinomial, and then we use the topic distribution of the words to pick the actual word from this multinomial for that particular topic. So this is how we define the generative process of how every word is generated. Now, if you look at this particular piece of code that I wrote in PyMC3, you can see there are exactly 4 lines corresponding to the 4 lines here, right? And it's very simple to specify them. And then you have the inference which says, okay, draw samples using this model and come up with my posterior. Now, this is a little simplistic because this particular snippet works for small data sets. But for larger data sets, we might need to use a few things such as batching and so on. I use the AEVB algorithm on PyMC3. So the previous one that I showed you was for illustration because it's very simple to look at and understand. But on playing with this a little more, I implemented this piece of code for LDA on all the posts on my website, machinelearninginterview.com, and I saw these topics. So these are all typical ML related topics like classification, deep learning, knowledge graphs. So these are hand labeled tags for the topics. So the point to note is that this piece of code is not very hard to write. Okay, let's go to Bayesian deep learning, which is the other thing that we talked about, how Bayesian models are influencing deep neural networks themselves. So the standard notion of a Bayesian deep learning model is when we have weights over the parameters of a deep neural network. So the parameters of when we have priors over the parameters of a deep neural network. So these are the priors here. So the picture on the left is basically, you see all the parameters, and the picture on the right is basically just putting some priors there. So once again, we have very nice platform support to be able to construct such Bayesian deep learning models easily. So you can, if you use TensorFlow, you can actually, you can have a probabilistic layer very easily specified and do inference on it in a black box fashion. So while we don't want to dig too deep on this particular topic, let's look at an example of a Bayesian deep learning model. And this time, let's go back to the different types of uncertainties that we talked about, the aleatoric uncertainty and the epistemic uncertainty. This is a popular paper by Alex Kendall and Yaron Gal in NIPS 2017, which talks about their model for capturing both aleatoric and epistemic uncertainty in a Bayesian neural network context. So if you see the picture here, this is a vision application, and what it is doing is it's segmenting an image to find various objects in it. The last 2 columns that you see are actually plotting the aleatoric and the epistemic uncertainty. If you look at the last but 1 column, or the column D, it is plotting the aleatoric uncertainty, and what you see is the places that you see the uncertainty are all the edges in the image. And it is natural to think that a pixel on the edge or a pixel on the border of 2 segments there would be natural uncertainty as to which segment to place it in. So this is a classic example of uncertainty that's inherent in the data, and throwing in more data cannot solve this problem. On the other hand, the other example we see here is for the epistemic uncertainty, where we see the certain parts of certain kinds of objects are not segmented very well. For example, wherever there are footpaths, this particular model is not able to segment very well. So in this particular case, probably throwing in more data might actually help, right? So this is an example of epistemic uncertainty. So in this paper, they actually in this context, what they say is that the epistemic uncertainty is handled by putting the prior on weights of a deep neural network. To handle the aleatoric uncertainty again, we need to be able to model the variance in the data as a function of the excess itself or the data itself. And that requires a different term in the loss function. So once again, we won't go into the details of this paper in the interest of time. So I want to sum up whatever we talked about so far. So first, we saw that it's important to know when we do not know. And we looked at various kinds of uncertainty. We saw that to handle uncertainty, Bayesian models help by enabling us to learn a distribution over the parameters instead of point values. And we saw that there is support in the form of probabilistic programming languages to make this process easy, where we can specify the generative process and the inference is done automatically. For instance, PyMCP, STAN, and so on. We saw what deep Bayesian models are in the context of entity topic model and an extension with arbitrarily deep and wide layers to better capture complex relationships in the data we have. And we saw Bayesian deep learning model, an example of it, which can capture uncertainty in parameters of deep neural network. And in the particular example, we saw it could handle both epistemic and aleatoric uncertainty. And there is great platform support for Bayesian deep learning as well in TensorFlow probability. So bottom line, while uncertainty is expensive, we can leverage state-of-the-art tools to quickly build models to know when they do not know. So that's roughly what I have today. Can I take questions?
So Lavanya, how we'll go about doing this is we've asked folks to key their questions in the Google form that's been shared in the chat link. So to the audience, please go ahead and put in any questions you may have for Lavanya in the Google form that's been shared, and she will get to them.
Sure.
She will
so
answer
I can
them
answer one of the popular questions that I always get from this talk,
Okay.
which is how effective are these when I want to use on applications at scale? So probabilistic programming languages have been there for some time, but how effective is it if I want to use on a large scale data set? And I think the answer to that is for many of the models that we use. So we use only 70% of the models we use are simple models, maybe classification using logistic regression or simpler models that we use. Or even the example of, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
I can hear you.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, or even the example of the topic modeling that we did, the latent Dirichlet allocation, these models work pretty well at scale. So for instance, I had tried on a few thousands of documents on my computer that's 5 years old, and the inference took less than a couple of minutes. But when we go to more complex models, if we want to do complex Bayesian models, like the arbitrarily deep and wide model that I showed, which has either many unknowns or which has more complex distributions in them, then these techniques might not be very efficient at scale. But I think the bottom line is for many of the commonly used problems, like if you want to do a Bayesian logistic regression to capture uncertainty in a classification problem, these models should work fairly well right now. And this is a hot area of research. So in a couple of years, there'll be many more inference algorithms coming up to make this even better.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Thanks so much for joining and opening us, Lavanya. Folks, please put down any questions you may have in the Google form. If it's all right, we're moving